Welcome to the Fight Nomad series, episode 2. In this episode, we're going to talk specifically about the country of Colombia and the city of Medellin. This episode is ideal for people who are interested in traveling to Medellin city. In the second half of this episode, I am going to answer Q&As that I got from my Instagram stories. First things first impressions of Medellin. Here are 6 things that I really took away. Number 1 is cost. I was really surprised to learn this, but actually I'm pretty sure that Medellin is even less expensive to live in than Thailand. I definitely wasn't expecting that at all. I thought that Colombia was going to be basically the same price as Mexico, and Mexico was actually quite expensive. Maybe because it was where we were staying, which was in Tulum, Mexico, which is kind of like a tourist hotspot in Mexico. To get some perspective, in the Laureles neighborhood, you can get like an apartment with a kitchen and a private bathroom for $30 a night, which is like, in California, that will get you like a dorm bed in a hostel. I feel like Colombia is like 70% less expensive than Thailand. First impression number 2, this place is very, very remote worker friendly. This is the first country or like place that I've traveled to where they will have malls where they have dedicated desks that have like charging port outlets. The tables by the middle of the day are packed full of people who are working with headphones on their laptops. I have never seen so many remote workers working from cafes, co-working spaces, even the mall. First impression number 3 is the motorcycle culture here, which is really cool. I think if I look out on the road, it will be like 50% cars driving and then 50% motorcycles and scooters that are driving. Okay, so Jay thinks that there are more cars than motorcycles, so I might be wrong. I felt like there were just as many. I was like 50-50. You feel like there are more cars? Yeah, it does make sense that there'd be more cars here because it is raining on and off a lot. And that's not ideal if you're a motorcyclist. Because my favorite way of getting around is generally by scooter or motorcycle, when I first got here, I really wanted to rent a motorcycle in order to get around. But it turns out it's actually not that cheap, like in comparison with Thailand. In Thailand, you can get, a scooter for like $5 a day. But here, when I looked into it and I called, it was at least $20 a day. And when you take into account that it's like raining on and off every single day and the fact that you can get an Uber to get around the city for a couple dollars, it just didn't seem worth it. First impression number 4 is how hilly it is over here. Medellin is definitely a city in a valley and on hills. It is so cool. I love it so much. Especially coming from Tulum, Mexico, which was completely flat, like super flat. And especially the Poblado neighborhood is built on top of hills. I love it. First impression number 5, it actually gets kind of chilly here, but that's also coming from the perspective of someone who likes warm weather. I'd say that when the sun is out, like right now, you can get away with walking around in a t-shirt and shorts, but when it starts raining, oh man, it does get kind of cold. Like I would want to wear a warm jacket out when it starts raining. Last final impression is that it is super jungly here. Kind of makes me feel like the Jungle Book jungle, where it's dark and tropical and cold. It's kind of hard to describe without seeing it. But in between the buildings, a lot of times in the Poblado and Laureles district, you will see like these dark gullies that kind of just go down, and there'll be like vines dripping into the gully, and it's really dark, and there'll be a river running down in the bottom, and it really makes you realize that if the city was not here, you'd just be immersed in a dark tropical jungle, basically. Moving on to 3 tips for newcomers coming to this city. Tip number 1 is language. It is not that easy to get around without speaking Spanish here, which is kind of good if you really want to work on your Spanish skills. I would highly suggest when coming to Colombia to just at least write down a list of sentences that you're most likely going to use, like how much is this? Get to know your numbers in Spanish, how to go to the bathroom, like stuff like that. Tip number 2 is where to stay when you come to Medellin. And that is definitely going to depend on what your expectations are and what you want to get out of being in Colombia. I love the Poblado area, which is kind of the foreigner area, the wealthier neighborhood. But when I say wealthy, I mean in terms of standards here in Colombia. but the cost of living is pretty much the same as any city in the States, if not less expensive. I personally have really loved the Poblado neighborhood for these reasons. First, it's very scenic. It's beautiful. It's like located on these hills. There are a bunch of like really unique, quirky businesses that are here, and it's very practical. Basically, all the amenities that I like to frequent, like good digital nomad friendly coffee shops that are beautiful, hair salons, lash salons, laundry places, everything is within walking distance. Definitely not representative of the average life of a local in Medellin. I realized that after I went on an electric bike tour with Turi Bike, where you kind of get a more realistic glimpse of the entire city. I really recommend that tour. It's like $35 for 4 hours. They really care about delivering good experience. Highly recommend. Not sponsored. Tip number 3, I don't know what your experience is going to be, but personally, my bank cards, both my US bank card and my Wise card, kept on getting rejected from ATM machines. So in the end, I kind of ended up just using my Wise card a lot when making purchases, which is definitely doable in the Poblado and kind of in the Laureles neighborhood. If you don't know what Wise is, or formerly TransferWise, it's so useful for people who work online or digital nomads, because it's basically like a bank but better. I'm not going to go in depth with it in this episode. Okay, now for answering Q&A. Question number 1, Monez asks, is it safe to walk on the streets? Now, like any city, that will definitely depend on which neighborhood that you're in. But if you are in the more like foreigner-friendly neighborhoods, which is Laureles and Poblado, from my personal experience, Laureles was safe to walk around in. We walked around in it at night, but it did feel a little bit sketchy. Poblado is definitely safe to walk around in at night. There will be lots of foreigners. Question number 2, Javi asks me, how easy is it to find sports gyms, and what sports gyms did you train at? I'm going to be honest, I really haven't been training that much martial arts since I've been here. I've actually been really getting into weightlifting. Although I love martial arts, and Muay Thai specifically, it is a pretty like cardio intensive sport. I'm really interested in just learning how to build more muscle recently. That being said, if you are in the Laureles neighborhood, I highly recommend checking out Evolution Center, which has opened recently. I also have it on my bucket list. I'm not sure if I'll be able to do it because we're leaving on Wednesday and it's already Sunday now, but I would really like to check out the martial arts gym at Lab, which is near the Poblado area before I leave. Question number 3 is temperature. And as I mentioned before, it is a bit chillier than I expected. When it's sunny outside, you can go around in a t-shirt and shorts, but when it rains, have a thick-ish jacket. Question number 4 is, what is the poverty in Medellin? If you only stay in the Laureles and Poblado neighborhood, you might say, at least this is what I thought, that the poverty was pretty low. But then after taking the electric bike tour via Turi Bike and getting to visit the rest of the city, there's definitely poverty in Medellin. It's kind of the same to any city that you will frequent. There will be neighborhoods where there are drug and homelessness problems. But then again, I would say having visited cities in California, it's not as bad as California. In California, there will be sidewalks where you can literally not walk on because there are so many homeless tents. Number 5, did I meet any cartel? Yeah, I think the TV series definitely popularized the idea of there being a huge like cartel culture in Colombia.
We've heard stories that if there's any people being robbed or anything like that, then the locals will intervene because they're trying to attract more tourism and bring this country back. There are no signs of cartel in Colombia so far that we've seen.
And the last question is, are there too many foreigners or tourists here? And I guess that question it depends on what your definition of what too many foreigners is. I've definitely visited places in the world where it did feel like, for me personally, there were too many tourists, and it was like the whole economy had been created around catering to the tourists. Tulum, Mexico definitely had that vibe a little bit. I don't get that vibe here in Medellin. Medellin definitely feels like it has its own unique culture and local population. And this wraps up podcast episode number 2. Oh, I'm not happy with these podcast episodes, but
that's why they call it number 2.
Yeah, it's twice number 2. All of this is just practice to get better at talking to the camera. The first episode that I filmed was all scripted and I just read from a script, and now I'm trying to freeform it more, which feels more comfortable, but I'm also still struggling with that as well. This is just for the experience. Okay, cheerio now, bye.